Hi, nice to see you. Oh my gosh, we're here, we've made it. Hey, really quick, before you get into today's video, please don't forget, if you like what you're watching, don't forget to hit the bell, subscribe, like, all of the good things. I appreciate you. Let's get to 1,000. Like, that's my little dream. You see down there? We're getting close. Do you see? Thank you. Appreciate you. And let's get into it. Hello. Fancy meeting you here. Now, when we left off, we were talking about castles. Franklin Castle to be exact, and I continued on my little journey and was looking up more castles in the US, but I wasn't getting the spook factor that I was looking for. And I was like, you know what? I need to go where it all began. I need to go back in time. So I took a little trip to Ireland in my head, on the internet, in virtual space. I've never been there myself. Not yet. One of my favorite Ghost Adventures episodes ever is the one where they go to the infamous Leap Castle. Leap Castle, the most terrifying episode. They encounter what is believed to be an elemental, which is one of the scariest things in the paranormal world to me. And I think it's because it is just so mysterious. They also, at one point, it sounds like they hear a banshee. So there's something to it. Like, Ireland is just full of magic. People that live there, like, literally actually believe in fairies to this day. It is a thing. It is highly respected. So what is it? What is it? Now, I'm not going to get into dimensions and all that stuff because it'll make my brain explode, so it'll probably make yours too. But look, let's tone it down. We're going to talk about Leap Castle, which is the most, said to be, the most haunted castle in Ireland. Pretty much every, like, ghost hunting show that you could think of has been there, and they have gotten insane responses. So let's go over the highlights real quick. Supposedly its land is haunted by something called an elemental, thought to have been created potentially even before this castle was even built. The Bloody Chapel, the Obilet, which is a hole where they would push people down with spikes at the bottom. Yeah, this castle had that. This castle is just shrouded in mystery, blood, gore, passion, destruction, love, death. Did I say death? Everything. It's all there. And to this day, currently, it is owned and inhabited as a private residence. There's someone just there living with all these things. Let me dive in. Why don't you get your biggest cup of your hottest tea or your beverage of choice, and let's get into it. Leap Castle stands in the county of Offaly. Now, I'm part Irish, so I think that's why I've always just been called Ireland. Part Irish, part Mexican. I'm a green bean. It's kind of fun. Leap Castle was built in the 1200s, and people will say the 13th century, which with my dyslexic little head, I'm like, 13th century, so the 1300s? No. Every time they say the 13th century, they mean 100 years before. I don't know why, because it's leading into it. Oh, it's bizarre. Okay, so built in the 1200s. Do you know how long ago that was? You guys, that's like over 800 years ago. I'm not a mathematician, okay? This thing has been there forever. At the time that it was built, Ireland was ruled by Irish clans, which is an interesting system all in itself. Before we get into what happened, like when the castle was built, we actually even have to back up before then. What was going on in this land? Well, this land was inhabited by druids. If you are a fan of Dungeons and Dragons, you might know what a druid is. And I want to do a whole separate video on druids on its own, because there's a lot of conflicting information on druids. Druids were Celts. They were native inhabitants of Ireland. Like, they were smart. They would learn in these big classes, but they didn't write anything down. They had to commit everything to memory. but they were very, very intelligent. A lot of people were like, oh, and they also have secret powers. Well, they knew a lot about the land. They knew a lot about everything. It intimidated people. What I'm going to go into with this is the impression that people had of druids at that time, but we'll do a video later to see if we can debunk these and see maybe how true or false this is. The land that this castle sat on was originally inhabited by druids. At the time that it was inhabited, it was said that they would use this land for their initiation ceremonies. Now, what did they do with these initiation ceremonies? Well, the hubbub about town was that they would often sacrifice animals and even humans. I'm not joking. They allegedly, because I don't need the druids coming for me. They're magic. I don't need that. They allegedly were sacrificing humans on this land. Oh my god, I'm getting like a Bailey Sarian vibe right now. I'm like tapping into my inner Bailey. Hi Bailey, love you. You would think like, okay, well, why weren't people stopping them if they were sacrificing people? Well, I don't know. Some things I read said that they were willing sacrifices. Some things said that they weren't, but apparently they were sacrificing people. Why wasn't anyone stopping them? Well, druids were priests. They were learned doctors. I mean, no one would tell them anything because they were like, dude, these guys are magic. Like, supposedly, like, these guys could tell when it was going to rain. And then supposedly they used to say that druids could, like, make smoke happen. They could make the weather turn. And at a time when people really relied on their crops and stuff, if someone can control the weather, you do not want to piss them off. Because if you're not eating, you're dying. Let the druids do their thing. Just stay away from them. Don't go into those hills. Yeah. The druids were apparently like murdering people on this land. Blood spilling, devastation, gross. We'll do a video on druids and then I want to see how you really feel about them because I feel like maybe they weren't that bad, but you know, it all goes back to a lot of things, which is how if they didn't write anything down, so the only things we know from them are of people that wrote about them, which as we know from our story about the Native Americans, it doesn't fare so well, unfortunately, for the folks that are not writing about what they're up to. You're only hearing the gossip from one side. In comes the O'Bannon clan. So at this time, Ireland was ruled by clans. Clans were the basis of society until the 17th century. And what does that mean? Which means the 1600s. Got it. Clan is Gaelic for family. Most of those people pretty much descended from the same ancestry, but sometimes not all of them were exactly family, but family is what you make it, right? But pretty much they're from the same ancestry. The clans were led by a chief or a chieftain. The chieftain was usually like the older, wisest, but strong, someone that was worthy to rule their clan. Like think like Mel Gibson and gosh, I haven't seen that movie in forever. Braveheart? Damn, I need to watch that. It's been a long time. You know, strong, wise, not afraid of anything. Not afraid to smack their butts at the oncoming clan that's coming to try to kill them. Because there wasn't really a clear way to choose. It wasn't like a king where it's like his first descendant would then take the throne. It was just like, okay, well, if this guy passes, like, it could be one of his kids, but it also could be someone completely different. As you can imagine, there was a struggle there in terms of seizing the power, because if your chief or your chieftain died, especially like tragically in battle, there was then a big shift to be like, who is going to take over this clan? And people would turn on their own clan members. These are their family members. It was dramatic, but dramatic like we're not talking Selling Sunset. We're talking like Game of Thrones, like killing family members. This is not a joke. The O'Bannon clan is a clan that first built the castle. But before the castle was built, there were two brothers competing to become the chieftain of the clan. Someone else in the clan was like, well, if you guys are competing, I have a great idea. Here's what you guys should do. You should go up to this ledge over. That's my dog. Don't be scared. She's just sad that I'm not in there. He's like, I got this great idea. Why don't you guys go to that big cliff up there? and jump. And whichever one of you survives is going to be the strong enough one to take over this clan. And the brothers are like, oh, that's brilliant. Now, who's the brilliant one? I'm thinking A and B, not so smart. C over here coming up with the idea. I think C wanted to take over. Well, we don't know what happened. We know supposedly that they jumped. We don't know who took it over. This is where the name of the castle comes from. Lep Castle. They leapt off of a cliff. It was called Lame O'Banion, which means leap of the Bannons. In comes the Occult clan. Okay, so the Occult clan is no one to fuck with. We don't mess with them. They are serious business. The Occult clan, late 15th century, ended up getting the castle. How? Okay, the O'Carrolls were violent. They were well known all around Ireland. You didn't screw with the O'Carroll clan. They didn't mess around. They were like, no bullshit. They weren't afraid to do anything. You looked at them wrong, they'd probably like have you strung up by your entrails. I don't know. They were brutal, known to be brutal, even within their own clan. They came upon this castle and they were like, oh, this is a great castle. We're going to take it over. And the O'Bannons were like, hey, oh, help yourself. Bye. They didn't put up a fight. They were out of there because they knew if they put up a fight, the O'Carrolls were going to fuck shit up. Quite literally. The O'Carrolls got Lep Castle. They just took it over. This castle actually was in a pass that went through the mountains. So that pass was used very frequently. So whenever people would go through this pass, like, you were really risking a lot, but you had to gain access to other parts of Ireland. Very often they would attack other clans, or I'm not quite sure too much of the history. I know that the British and Irish did not get along, but I did read something where they also even attacked a British troops or something that had gone through. I'm very interested to get into that history as well. 1532, Mulrooney chieftain passes away, and his two sons wanted to take over. One son was a priest, and the other was a known fighter. Well, one day, the priest's son was in the chapel, giving mass and saying the rites. And his brother came late. And in the middle of mass, his brother bursts through the door and walks up to his brother and stabs him with a sword. It was like the ultimate sacrilegious act. He stabbed his brother in the middle of mass. You're killing your own family member, let alone your brother, in the middle of a religious ceremony. Brother against brother. You killed a priest. It's all bad. Bad. Thus, we get the title, the Bloody Chapel. So this castle's chapel just has not good energy in it. Bad energy in it. They also use this chapel to host guests and dinners. At another point in time, the chieftain had paid 40 members of the McMahon clan. McMahon. I wonder if that's any relation to Vince McMahon. Huh. Well, sorry Vince McMahon, but you guys were the lesser clan in this story. They paid 40 members of this clan to train for warfare. They asked them to attend this banquet in the chapel after they had trained, and they must have helped them with some stuff. But here's the thing, they didn't have, it's not that they didn't have any way to pay them, it's that they didn't want to pay them. So what they did is they're like, oh, well, come, have some dinner, let's celebrate. And when they went to eat, little did they know the food was poisoned. So it's true. All of these men died. And after, it's said that the O'Carrolls went wild. They were like in this like high. These O'Carrolls they're crazy. They're little crazy guys. They went wild. And it is said that they cut their heads off and they kicked them around and they threw them out of the windows. What? They're dead already. Why'd you need to cut their heads off? Why do you need to dance around and throw them out the windows? These people were brutal, you guys. This Ooh, it made my stomach turn, quite honestly. Yeah, these O'Carrolls are nothing to fuck with. Somewhere around 1558, an English prisoner was taken at Leap Castle. His name was John Darby, and he was kept in a cell at the top of the castle. A daughter of the O'Carrolls began to sneak him food and, like, kind of fell in love with him. How, like, risque. I don't know if he was just handsome, I don't know, but she was sneaking him food. And one night, she heard that her brother was planning to kill John Darby. And she was like, oh no, no, no. So, when her brother was sleeping, she went and stole the keys from him and crept up, and she went to let him out, and I can only imagine she's probably like, oh, my love, you must run, run and never return. And they embrace in this last kiss, and he goes to run to head towards the stairs, and all of a sudden they hear footsteps coming up the stairs. Her brother had woken up, and he knew his keys were missing, and he was coming up. And John Darby knew, like, look, if he comes up here, and if he puts me back in that cage, my life is about to be ruined. He probably won't even kill me. He'll probably just torture me to the point that I wish I was dead. So John Darby acted quick, and he ran down the stairs. And the stairs in these staircases, these little turrets, they were very steep, and they were made that way so that if the castle came under siege, you could push someone down and you're gonna screw them up. So he ran and he pushed this guy down. He pushed her brother down. He pushed that O'Carroll down the stairs, and he broke his neck. And John Darby, at this point, I'm not sure like how this happened, but he ended up marrying the sister. So I don't know if the clan was like, oh, okay, you can stay, because that part's a little weird to me. Because in my head, I'm like, wouldn't the rest of the clan be like, what'd you just do? I don't know. But they let him marry the O'Carroll girl. And I can't remember her name. I didn't write it down. That was my bad. It seems that at this point, he actually started to take over the castle. So I'm wondering if her brother, maybe at that time, was the chieftain. But I can't imagine why they would allow him to take it over, unless the O'Carrolls had moved and there were just a few left in this castle. But basically, John Darby ends up taking over the castle, and he lives there with his wife, Enola. It was during the English Civil War that Jonathan Darby hid his treasures in the grounds of the castle. What he did is he had two of his men help bury this treasure, but then later he killed the guys so that no one except for him would know where it was. Later, he was imprisoned for treason. And after he was released and he came back to the castle, so much had changed that he couldn't find where the treasure was. And until this day, no one knows where that treasure is hidden. It's still probably in these grounds. It is said that his ghost is seen wandering the halls, tapping the walls looking for it. John Darby, their descendant, in the late 19th century, so now we're talking Victorian times, you guys. My favorite time, because they were weird like me, and they like ghosts and stuff. So, Jonathan Darby ended up marrying an English woman, Mildred Darby. And we love her, and you're gonna find out why. But they brought their family up to Leap Castle. Now, Mildred, she wanted to be a writer. She was very smart. She was very lovely. She did not have a good relationship with her husband, unfortunately. Like, it started off great, but he kind of sucked. I mean, they had a few children, and I believe that they lost like the first child or two, so it was not a good start. He would go away for work a lot, so Mildred had a lot of time to herself. And Mildred wanted to be a writer. She began writing. That was her outlet. They had nothing else to do at the time. God, how much more would I do if I wasn't scrolling through freaking TikTok all day? How many more videos would I have? At that time, though, women weren't allowed to do anything. Women couldn't do anything. You were supposed to read your books on how to be a lady. You're supposed to, like, do the lady thing. Mildred would write under a pseudonym. Her pseudonym was Andrew Mary. Merry Christmas. Yeah, her pseudonym name was Andrew Mary, and she actually had a lot of her writings published. But one of the most compelling things that she wrote about was her experiences in this castle. Because at this point, this castle had seen so much bloodshed. She was into the occult and she was open to these things. So she began to experience stuff in this castle. And her outlet was writing about it. And she wrote this fantastic story that was published in a magazine that I'm going to read to you in our next video. It's so good. I'm about halfway through reading it and I'm pulled in. It's about her experiences, and she writes it as a story of someone visiting the castle. Anywho, in her writing, she called it Kilman Castle, so that way people wouldn't know where it was. And, you know, like her husband also, he didn't believe in the supernatural. He thought she was crazy, and he would be pissed if he knew that she was writing about their castle, especially as this pseudonym. Like, he'd be like, what are you doing? Shouldn't you be cooking and like sewing and stuff and like taking care of our children? No, lady, don't be spreading our business around the world. So let's talk about how Mildred liked to dabble into the occult. It was the rage at the time. In her dabblings, she would do all kinds of stuff. Like, she would mess with Ouija boards, she would do seances, writing. She had one of those planchettes that had the little, I got goosebumps talking about it. You'd put the pen in and it would write at the same time. So she was really open to this stuff. In her dabblings, she claims that she came face to face with it. She refers to it, you guys, she refers to it as it. Dude, I don't know if you can see my little hairs. I don't like it. And what is she referring to? She's referring to the elemental. The elemental is a being. It is not a human. It is not a demon. It is something that is an energy that is brought about by the earth. It's from the elements. The fact that it's like hard for me to wrap my head around. And for some reason that scares me more, because what are its tendencies? It almost makes you think maybe it's more animalistic. Because you kind of know what you're dealing with when it's a ghost. You know what you're dealing with, even though it's terrifying when it's like something demonic. But this is something that's from the earth, so do you even have the power over something like that? I mean, can you control Mother Nature? No. Could you control an elemental? I don't know, you guys. I don't know. So, where did this elemental even come from? Some people believe that maybe it was something that was conjured up by the Druids to help with the land. And some people think that the elemental was potentially even conjured up by Mildred Darby herself. That maybe in her seances and stuff, she had actually kind of cultivated that energy into manifesting into something. What do you think? Mildred writes this article. In this article, the teller of the story says, I was standing in the gallery looking down at the main floor when I felt somebody put a hand on my shoulder. The thing was about the size of a sheep, thin, gaunt, shadowy. Its face was human, to be more accurate, inhuman. Its lust in its eyes, which seemed half decomposed in black cavities, stared into mine. The horrible smell, 100 times intensified, came up into my face, giving me a deadly nausea. It was the smell of a decomposing corpse. It's said to have had like a pig face or like a sheep's, ram's head, body, pig. It is described so terrifying. She says that she came face to face with it, you guys. So it was somewhere in the early 1900s when this house was being worked on. A workman made a gruesome discovery. He found a hidden dungeon behind a wall in the Bloody Chapel. It was a fake wall. And when he got past it, there was a drop floor. And underneath it, they found an obilet. In French, the word oublier means to forget. It's a deep hole in the ground where prisoners would be thrown and just forgotten. But could you imagine the smell? The obilet is in the chapel. Remember, they used to eat in the chapel too. When they discovered the obilet and went to clear it out, because they had to clear it out, because what did they find in there? Human remains. Bones upon bones upon bones that had been thrown on stakes that were at the bottom. They had to take 3 cartloads of bones out of this castle. So that also tells you, yeah, the first few people that died in there were probably really lucky and just died instantly. But you know, not everyone was fallen, right? It's said that this obilet is also pretty close to the kitchen. So if people didn't die immediately, they'd die of starvation or loss of blood. And this also means they'd sit there, they'd smell all the foods while the people are eating and feasting above them. I mean, this was the O'Carrolls, like, little bye. I forgot they were there. Yeah, over 150 human remains were discovered. Along with the skeletons, they also actually found a pocket watch that dated back to the mid-1800s. So the obilet was actually used more recently than we even realize. Do you think the Darbys were using it? Or was someone crawling around? Like, how does a pocket watch get it was found on a skeleton. The spikes that were in there were these big, long wooden spikes. They were sticking up 8 feet. And it's said to this day that sometimes visitors feel this overwhelming urge to throw themselves down it. Not me. I ain't going there. No way. In 1922, the English and the Irish were really at odds, and the Darbys they got word that people were coming to destroy the castle because they knew, even though Mr. Darby was half Irish, at this point, from the lineage, he was Irish, but they knew that Mrs. Darby was not. And so they were coming. They were coming for this castle, and they were going to jack it up. The Darbys fled at this point, and the castle was destroyed. It was looted, and then it was set on fires. It was set on fire. So a lot of this castle, unfortunately, has been destroyed. So at that point, the castle was boarded up, and for years it sat there. So 1970, an Australian actually bought the castle. His name was Peter Bartlett. His mother was an O'Bannon. Oh my god, the O'Bannons! Finally comes full circle. And he brought a white witch, a mystic from Mexico, to exorcise the castle because he knew about all the bad crap that was going on over here. And the white witch, after she did her cleansing, she said the spirits that remained were not malevolent, but they're just the ones that insisted on staying there. And he lived in this castle until 1989 when he passed away. And he fixed it up as he could as he lived in there. Then the castle was purchased by Sean Ryan and his wife Anne. They bought the castle to make it inhabitable again, and they worked on it little by little. And they actually still live in the castle to this day. Cute little family. It is kind of interesting because when they first bought the castle and first began working on it, things started to happen. Like Sean's accident, where he broke his kneecap when he was working on the house. He fell off a ladder. The ladder was like pushed away from the wall. And then he had another accident where he broke his ankle while working on the house. And they thought about giving it up at this point because his wife's like, you can't be like, you broke your kneecap and then you're finally better. Now you broke your ankle. Like, those are serious injuries. We need to get out of here. But he said, no, we're going to stay. So they stayed. And nothing happened after that in terms of harm to them. They found a hidden chamber behind a wall where the priests used to hide, it said. They also uncovered more than one spiral staircase that had been permanently hidden behind walls to make it look like they had always been there. So they began finding these rooms, these hidden staircases. Like, what else are they going to uncover? And also, like, don't you think if you lived somewhere, you'd kind of pick up if a wall turned and you're like, shouldn't there be more there? Like, you kind of are aware of your space, you would think. Mildred, in her writings, what's kind of interesting, she claimed to have heard about these secret passageways and staircases and rooms from the spirits in her seances. And here we are, and this new family is finding them. So was there something to it? So I looked up a few interviews with Sean Ryan, a lovely man. And he's very just nonchalant about the spirits at the castle. And he's like, yeah, I see a lot of spirits. Sometimes it's like a haze with an aura around it. There's a lady, he said, they call her the governess. And sometimes she'll like reach out and touch people. He said there's 2 little girls that run around, but there's no records of this governess or the children. So he's not really sure where those came about. But could it be Mildred, maybe? Sometimes he says there's people will claim that like they'll feel like a dog or something run by them and like rub their leg, but there's nothing there. And it's not like a threatening feeling. And something that he said that I thought was very interesting is he said people are surprised by how calm they are after they have this encounter. They're surprised at how calm they feel. That, oh, you have a dog? I felt it rub up against my leg, but then I didn't see it. And that right there also is like my, like, aha moment of, like, my first time that I went on that ghost hunt. And I realized the difference between malevolent spirits and something that is just there and just living. And it's as if you brushed by someone on the street and it's not intimidating and it's not scary and it's not evil. And how beautiful to come to that realization that not all things that are paranormal are terrifying. I just thought it was kind of cool that he said that. And that is why I think when you hear people say like, oh, how could you live in a haunted house? Well, if you are in a house that does not have anything that is malevolent to you, then maybe it is something that you could just be okay with living with. I don't know. Would you? He says that they'll hear stuff at night. A lot of times they'll hear people in rooms talking and you'll go in, but you can't tell what direction it's coming from, but you'll go into a room and no one's there and it's quiet. They'll hear doors closing. They'll hear footsteps. But they can never really pinpoint where these things are coming from, but it's always just ambient, like in the background. And today, it still stands. And that, my friends, is the story of Lep Castle. I would love to visit it. Actually, let's look at is there a website for it? lepcastle.net. It is open. Okay. So lepcastle.net. If you go there, you can get the history. You can find out about the elemental. Ooh. Lep Castle is open for visitors Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Contact Sean Ryan, and here's his little phone number and his little email. You guys. Oh my gosh. Our next big trip is to Europe, and this is on my fucking list. Yes. Oh my god. Oh my god. So you can go for visits. Okay. Wow. That's really cool. So yeah, you can go and visit, you guys. Check it out. But what an interesting history. And when I come back, I'm going to read you the article. Not the article, I guess you would call it the story. The story that Mildred Darby wrote about the castle. It's something, you guys. It's a long one. It's titled A House of Horrors by Andrew Mary, aka Mildred Darby. And I'm going to read it to you. And we're going to kind of get an idea of what it was like to actually live in this house and experience the things that happened in this house. Alright, hey, let me know what you thought. And don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell. I'm so appreciative that you're here and watching this. And let me know what you thought about my first full face video. I've been afraid to do it, but here we are. So, have a wonderful evening. And namaste and good night. And don't let the ghost bite. See ya.